So in such a scenario, more insulin would actually be better as far as a muscle repair level. So there's different layers to this, but as far as a keto fat loss diet goes, don't push more than like 1 serving of whey protein a day, or like 40 grams around, guesstimating. That's assuming you time it properly. And if you can have it, if you can avoid having it, but have it after a workout. That's a better time to do it, especially if it's in the evening. Don't have it for breakfast. And even if you have it for breakfast, you could mix all the different nuts and avocados and peanut butters, throw some guacamole in there, you could do all that stuff, and it's not going to do much for you because you're essentially giving a very high insulin food and just trying to taper it down a bit. It's like, just have it later in the day or after a workout. Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and in this video, I'm going to answer keto whey protein questions. So this also applies to a lot of keto and protein of any sort type of questions, but essentially, earlier this year, I put out a video on whey protein on keto, and that video blew up. Okay, it was pretty short, succinct, right to the point on whey protein, which is exactly what I wanted from that video. But there were a lot of questions that still kept coming up, I guess, because I never even thought of some of these things. But other videos on my channel were also receiving these, whey protein questions or protein questions with keto, all these other things. And I'm putting out this video to answer the most frequently asked keto protein questions. So I'm pretty sure I didn't put whey protein in the title, but there's a picture of a whey protein jug in the thumbnail. So, this video is going to be about both in general, but I'm going to, focus on whey protein first. So here comes your keto questions answered. So to make this video simpler, because I'm going to be answering a lot of elaborate questions, I'm going to give you some generalized keto protein guidelines here, and then I'll expand on these as I answer people's specific questions. So to make things simple, let's say the number one rule of all protein is that the most problematic one, as in source, is whey protein. The most problematic source of protein is whey protein as far as a ketogenic diet is concerned. Now, there's ways to minimize how problematic it can be, but whey protein, which is why I have a picture of whey protein in the thumbnail, but I didn't write that in the title, is because whey protein is typically what comes to people's mind, and they tend to think, oh, I can just have more protein, or protein's the problem, right? Whey protein is more often than not the problem, because whey protein has the highest and longest insulin spike of basically all protein sources. So a lot of times people are worried, oh, if I have too much protein on keto, I'll be kicked out of ketosis, right? If you have, chicken breasts, yeah, they're a lean meat, there's less fat in there to blunt the insulin response, but essentially chicken breasts have nowhere near the level of insulin response as a whey protein shake does, and nor does it last as long. So it just so happens that the most commonly associated form of protein that people think of when they're trying to boost a protein intake has the highest and most problematic response. But here's the thing. Rule number 2 is insulin is not necessarily a problem. I know, confusing, right? Because of what I was just saying. But insulin is an anabolic hormone, okay? Insulin is an anabolic hormone, and it wants to build things. So in the context of a keto diet for fat loss, if you have an insulin spike right in the morning from whey protein, right, with no other ingredients to blunt it, the insulin response, which I'll get to shortly, then an insulin spike in the morning will dictate the entire metabolic status of your day. So it's basically telling your body, oh, hey, we're trying to build stuff here today, Bob. We're not trying to break down fat and use that for fuel because we have anabolic hormone here as a response from that highly insulinogenic and fast digesting whey protein. But if you have that after a workout, then your body's saying, hey, we have a bunch of tissue to repair, right? I'm generalizing. If you want more scientific explanation of this, watch my other videos. But your body is detecting that there is muscle broken down, tissue that has to be repaired, and it's like, okay, this insulin is now going to be allocated where we need it, right? And it's not going to be as big of a barrier for fat loss. And so those are the generalized protein rules. And now for whey protein, like I said, it has the highest insulin response, but there's generally two or three approaches that people commonly do with whey protein. They either try to throw a bunch of other stuff in there to, blunt the insulin response, which you can do. And that's what I've recommended in my other video. I said, try to mix macros and try to have it with a meal. That's the most practical way to do it is, if you're going to have that insulin response from the whey protein shake in the morning, have a meal with it, have breakfast, because at least that way you're having one meal out of the day and, you can go the rest of the day. But for a lot of people, if they're doing fasting or something, that's not going to apply to them. So don't have the whey shake is the worst thing you can do. Don't have it at all. So people will go for the mixing macro strategy, right? Fiber, fat, I'll explain the differences in a moment. Or what they'll do is they'll try to essentially just eliminate it altogether. And you can do that, but you are better off eliminating it up until the point of a workout. So don't have like a billion different whey protein shakes a day. The general rules of whey protein are keep it to one per day and, not necessarily one, but don't have more than like a high quantity of whey protein, more than like 50 grams, which is even pretty high. 40 grams is around the cap of whey protein, I would say, per day, but this also depends on how big your workout was and what time of day you did your workout, and also essentially how much protein you've had in the day, and if you're having it timed appropriately with a meal, because that will blunt the insulin response. And sometimes you don't want to blunt that insulin response because A, you have muscle to repair, or B, if you didn't eat all day, it doesn't matter if you have an insulin response at your one meal a day, right? Because essentially you were going to have, let's say you went from 3 meals a day to 1. You were going to have insulin go up at any point in the day whenever you eat anything. Just it would be a little bit higher with whey protein. So if you're having 1 meal a day, for example, you were going to have a high insulin response anyways because you were going to be eating a lot of food. So having whey protein with that is really not going to do much more. In fact, there could be benefits to getting hydrolyzed whey protein, which carries a higher insulinotropic response, which will then jack up the insulin response of the other foods you're eating. I know, complicated, right? So in such a scenario, more insulin would actually be better as far as a muscle repair level. So there's different layers to this, but as far as a keto fat loss diet goes, don't push more than like 1 serving of whey protein a day, or like 40 grams around, guesstimating. That's assuming you time it properly. And if you can avoid having it, but have it after a workout. That's a better time to do it, especially if it's in the evening. Don't have it for breakfast. You could mix all the different nuts and avocados and peanut butters, throw some guacamole in there, you could do all that stuff, and it's not going to do much for you because you're essentially giving a very high insulin food and just trying to taper it down a bit. It's like, just have it later in the day or after a workout. Now, time to answer some questions. So, we have, what do you think of adding 2 tablespoons of coconut oil to 1 scoop of whey protein? Will that lower the insulin spike caused by whey? Basically, here's another specific variant of that whole mixing macros into the shake argument. So yeah, you can do this. You can mix the fat with the protein, and that can blunt the insulin response a bit. You're better off mixing it with a whole meal because you'll get more of that blunting effect because there's more food being digested. But essentially, coconut oil is not a good choice to do this with, especially because too much coconut oil can really upset your stomach. This is because of the lauric acid in the coconut oil. So coconut oil is a very fast absorbing fat, and a lot of people add it very liberally to ketogenic diets, especially for fat loss. And I don't recommend this. Coconut oil is good, but there's a limit, there's a ceiling to it, because once you go past that ceiling, you're gonna have some serious stomach upset, and too many people make this mistake up front, and they blame keto, but in reality, it's just because they made a mistake of adding 2 tablespoons of coconut oil to their whey shake, and then they go to work, and then they're shitting themselves. So, that's one problem that you want to avoid. So I don't recommend adding that. So, should I be afraid of acesulfame, potassium, and sucralose in flavored whey protein and sparkling ice zero sugar drinks? I'm getting paranoid that all this little thing is going to kick me out of ketosis. Thanks for the question, Steven. But essentially, you should be afraid of acesulfame, potassium, And I have a video on sucralose, stevia, sulfur, potassium, all the other different types of sweeteners on my page that you could encounter on any diet, right? But particularly a keto diet. And I explain, the blood sugar effects and the health effects actually of each of these things, because stevia is generally the gold standard. Aim for naturally sweetened whey shakes and all these other things on any kind of diet. But as far as your blood sugar, for most people, sucralose and Splenda don't influence blood sugar that much, if at all. Some people it does. In some individuals, Splenda can raise blood sugar. If I'm speaking gibberish to you here, what's going to happen is some sweeteners will kind of simulate to your body that, oh, we're eating some sweets right now. So it'll anticipate a blood sugar rise, and your insulin will go up as well. But essentially, you don't have to worry about ACE-K and Splenda from a blood sugar perspective, or stevia from a blood sugar perspective. They can have a slight amount, but as long as you're getting it from stevia or a naturally sweetened sweetener, then you're doing things much better, and realistically, that's the best way to go. It's nowhere near the level of problems you could encounter with something like ACE-K, aspartame, MSG, or other things that can essentially trick your brain into thinking a food tastes better than it does. So ACE-K, sucralose, those are things that you want to, in general, minimize, okay? And I've had plenty of products with those things, and I just try to keep it to a minimal. I mean, it's not going to kill you on the spot. They're FDA approved, but still, stevia is the gold standard. A lot of these newer sweeteners are new, and we haven't had them around for a century yet, to analyze them. What about glucagon? Doesn't it balance out insulin in response to protein? So, Sean, thanks for the question. Basically, glucagon and insulin have a reciprocal relationship. So, like I said, insulin's an anabolic hormone, and glucagon mobilizes fatty acids from the liver. So essentially, glucagon is what's going to raise when your body has to start using more fat. And there's this dynamic between the pancreas and the pancreas and the liver, where when insulin is high, glucagon is typically low. When glucagon is high, insulin's typically low. So it's almost like when your body's trying to be anabolic, it shuts off fat burning, because that's exactly what it does. And when it's trying to be fat burning, it shuts off building. So even for these, keto bulk type of things that I talk about, there's a careful way of managing this anabolic state out of an inherently preservative state, right? So does it balance out insulin? No, not necessarily. They have a reciprocal relationship. How about having a scoop of whey protein with 4 tablespoons of peanut butter and 1 spoon of chia seeds? So here's how we're getting a lot more practical, and I like this type of question is one I want to analyze because it helps us get more practical. So thank you for the question, Shaji. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. So in general, I don't recommend adding a shitload of fat to a whey protein shake because, like I said, it still is only going to blunt the insulin response so much, and you're better off just pushing that shake later in the day or after a workout, or having it with dinner, for example, right? But here's some other problems that could come with mixing those things into the whey shake that will give you a better understanding of how this whole state works. So more fat doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be in a deeper state of ketosis. Ketosis only requires an absence of carbohydrates. So you can add all the fat you want in the world. If you're still having too much of an insulin response, you're not going to be in as deep of a state of ketosis. Now, even if you were going to add in a fat source, peanut butter is very high in omega-6 fats, and there's also a lot of stuff tampered in most peanut butters to make it taste better, and it's very high in inflammatory fats and hydrogenated oils. So do not have too much peanut butter. It will be a recipe for inflammation. But if you get it from a natural peanut butter, right, then yeah, that is one better way to go. But I'm not done yet. In general, the fact that I don't recommend adding in such an inflammatory fat in the morning as well, with that high insulin response, what you're basically doing is you're mixing a very slow digesting food, like this chia seed, which is fiber, and peanut butter, and then you're mixing it with very fast digesting food like whey. And that could also upset your stomach, because when something digests at a fast speed and something digests at a slow speed, essentially, whichever one dominates, like whichever one you had first, essentially, let's say you had the slow digesting stuff first and this fiber that's going to slow everything down, and then you had a fast digesting food like whey protein. Essentially, that could slow down the food's digestion that's meant to be fast. So this whey protein could eventually slow down and then spend longer amounts of time in your gut, causing it to ferment, and that's why people have like the protein farts and stuff like that. It's actually not from whey protein. unless somebody's either allergic to lactose or if they just timed it inappropriately with a fast digesting and a slow digesting food, which later causes the whey protein to ferment in their gut because it's basically rotting in their gut. That's what fermenting is. And, from there, it creates these short chain fatty acids, especially with a fiber source. And then it, results in people having gas. So I don't recommend doing that because not only are you going to have gas, but you're going to not feel comfortable. You're going to feel an unsettling feeling in your gut. So I don't recommend that, but thank you for the question. It's something that helps people learn a lot just from simply that question. So in general, again, keep it to after a workout or with dinner. Let's see. Just recently found your channel. Love the keto knowledge. Thank you. Thank you, Cross. Okay. So what else we got here? I drink 2 scoops with 3 tablespoons of flaxseed. 3 tablespoons of flaxseed is 21 grams of fiber, so it keeps me in ketosis. I only do this after working out so I won't go out of ketosis. Again, same explanation applies, especially when you're using 2 scoops of whey protein. It's going to have an even higher insulin response, and then you're having a large amount of flaxseed and a large amount of fiber with that. So again, it's going to slow the digestion. And think about the purpose of seeds, right? Seeds are something that humans can eat no problem. Not no problem, but a lot of people can eat seeds and it's fine. But seeds are meant to pass through the gut and then end up in fertilized human shit. That's the purpose of seeds, because plants want to survive just as bad as we do. And their seeds was an adaptation to, animals kept eating the damn plant. So the whole point was, how are they going to reproduce if they don't have some sort of offspring that can withstand the animal's digestive process? So that's what seeds are meant for. They're meant to pass through the gut, and they're not going to be digested or offer any nutritional benefit, especially because flax seeds tend to be higher in omega-6, but also I believe they're very slightly estrogenic. But I don't think that's really a problem for flaxseed. I've had plenty of things with flaxseed in them, but I just don't force it. I don't have it all the time. They're also not a significant source of omega-3s. They contain, I'm getting too far down the rabbit hole here. They contain ALA instead of EPA DHA. So bottom line, there's minimal benefit to having them as a nutritional source. If you like them, cool, but don't force, 3 tablespoons of flax seeds with a shake, especially such a high volume whey protein shake. This is a recipe for gastric upset, so do not do it. Thank you for the question though, Ricardo. Will eating 2 scoops of isolate protein break my ketosis? Yes, it will. Well, here's the thing. The insulin response will break ketosis. It'll dampen ketosis, but it depends on how adapted your body is. And keep in mind, if you've just worked out, you have stuff to repair. You want that insulin response. You want that insulin spike. And again, timing is key. Your body is not in a anabolic or a catabolic state all day long. You can watch my video on carb backloading or my video with Golden Era Bookworm where we talk about the building muscle and burning fat at the same time, Vince Gironda diet. Either of those explain the mechanisms behind this. But essentially, you're never just burning fat, or just because you're in ketosis doesn't mean you're going to burn fat all day, or that more ketones equals more fat loss. That's a misconception. All you have to do is be in the fat burning pool of ketosis, and as long as your calories are in check, that will dictate how much demand there is for your body to produce energy, right? It's an energy balance, but you're in a state where your body's more able to use those fats so as fuel, like stored body fat. So when we're talking about will it break ketosis, or if you shouldn't even worry about it breaking ketosis if you have a use for the anabolic insulin rise. So in general, is it a problem if you have it after a workout? No, especially if you work out very hard. And also, breaking ketosis at a certain part of the day is not necessarily the problem. What the actual problem is example, let's say somebody eats an apple, right? The apple contains sugar and fructose, which if you have too much sugar or fructose, it's going to start storing glycogen in your liver, which will then set you back the next day. So that even when your body processes that sugar and the blood sugar spike crashes and the insulin spike crashes, essentially the next day your body has to use up that liver glycogen before you can get back into ketosis. So the act of breaking ketosis with an insulin spike isn't even necessarily the problem, especially if you do it at a time in the evening where you have to repair. or you have an anabolic purpose for that anabolic insulin rise. So even if it does break your ketosis, basically it's going to go exactly where you want, build muscle, and then you're going to go to sleep, and the next day you're going to wake up in ketosis. That's essentially how it would work. Meanwhile, if you had an insulin spike from a lot of sugar, your body is going to store that basically, and some might go to your liver. If it's fructose, more of it's going to go to your liver, and that's going to then, even after that insulin spike crashes, right, and you wake up the next day, you're not necessarily going to be in the keto state because your body's like, oh, we still have carb fuel here, let's use that up first, right? Hopefully that answers the question. Now, I could stop it here, and I might stop it here, but maybe I'll make a part 2. You know what, fuck it, I'll just answer these questions real quick. So, great video, bro. Thank you. I've been doing ketogenic diet for 1 month now. I've noticed I've lost a lot of muscle mass. Since yesterday I took whey protein and I felt better. Will this slow down my fat loss? Now, I believe I have a long answer here, which I could post here, but essentially, a lot of people think they lose muscle from the first few weeks, right, when they start doing keto. But the reality is you actually are losing water weight. And there's certain ways you can balance out electrolytes to do this, and this is what I do when I'm doing my online coaching, because there's lots of little variables. And there are ways that you can just be nonchalant and make this effortless and just, not have to worry about these things. One way to do that is know that if you think you're losing muscle mass at first, you're most likely not, unless you continually break ketosis, or if you just stop training altogether or something, right? In the same time, you're having very low calories. But for most people, they just lose that water retention, and having a high insulin spike, right, which can, especially from whey protein and stuff like that, it can turn some of the extra protein into glucose in your bloodstream. So you can get more of that water retention effect because carbs retain water. So when we're talking about, do you actually lose muscle? No, you don't. And I have plenty of videos on this, so don't be afraid. But a lot of people believe they do it first because they lose that water retention and their body isn't used to, they feel flatter. It's actually a thing. People feel flat at first for the first month, but you still have the same amount of muscle mass. And when you go to the gym, you're going to be lifting the same weight. And essentially, it's just an adaptation first while your body learns to retain more water from electrolytes. So essentially, it's not making you lose muscle mass, but in general, apply the same principles I've explained of whey protein here, and you won't, slow down fat loss as long as you time it appropriately and you have a calorie deficit in place and you're staying in ketosis. Last one, what if I add nuts to the shake or intake some nuts while drinking the shake? That's nuts. No. That's not the end of the video, because I'll say, yeah, you could do that, but the same rules apply. Like I said, you could throw in guacamole, you could throw in, lard, whatever you want to put in there. It's not going to make much of a difference. And if you are going to put anything in there, make that what you put in there dinner. So just have it with dinner or after a workout. And actually, you know what? We had one more from Ken who said, can you mix in bulletproof coffee? You can. I've done that plenty of times, but I don't recommend doing that in the morning because, like I said, an insulin spike in the morning will dictate the metabolic status of your day for the entire day, and it will kind of turn off fat burning. And like I said, you can still try to do this, and some people who aren't necessarily pursuing aggressive fat loss do this and they feel great. Like when I'm not trying to lean down any further because I just maintain lean body composition all year round, when I'm just staying lean or trying to build muscle, I don't care if I have that insulin spike in the morning. I don't mind it at all. So for you, if you have a very aggressive fat loss plan in mind or a goal or a deadline, then yeah, don't have the whey protein shake in the morning. But if you're just doing keto for lifestyle, you can totally have the whey protein shake in the morning. It's not going to be a problem, especially if you like it with a carefully set up bulletproof coffee like that. That's the best way to mix in a fat source. It's better than peanut butter, too many omega-6. It's better than flax seeds or chia seeds because there's fiber there, which, in high quantities can upset the stomach with the fast digestion, slow digestion. Bulletproof coffee whey isolate is actually the best way to go. So that's also another reason I'm glad I answered this one at the end of the video, because if you are going to do it, this is the way to do it. Bulletproof coffee, although it can denature the protein a bit, it's not really a problem. Collagen protein is even better, but because that has a lower insulin response. But like I said, the more you can keep a lower insulin state in the morning, the more you're going to be primed for fat burning. And this is why intermittent fasting and fasting works so well in general, because you're not eating anything and you have no insulin response. Essentially, you're just keeping stable. So if you're going to do whey protein mixed with a fat source, that's the way to do it. But even from there, if you don't care about immediate, short-term weight loss, then don't concern yourself with, hey, I like having a scoop of peanut butter in my shake. Do it. Just get it from natural peanut butter, because there's too many hydrogenated palm oils and all these other seed oils, which are highly inflammatory. They're closer to lab chemicals than real food, thrown into these oils and butters. So essentially, that's the way you handle the whey. I hope I've shown you the way, and I hope that you click subscribe, by the way. All right. My name is Anthony Romano. Subscribe to me right now and like this video, and let me know what else you want me to answer. Send this video to people. Send this video to your friends and anybody else you know who's interested in keto. I hope I've answered your questions effectively. Go to my website, romanoketo.com, for coaching and programs dropping very soon. Besides that, peace.